Oh, you guys saw it too. So terrible. Why are you wondering your host? It's going to stop ringing. I didn't finish it. Okay. So this is typically the graveyard session, which hopefully won't be so miserable. We didn't have a really big lunch here, like lunch. How was lunch?
Can everybody hear you?
Can you all hear me? I don't really want to put on the lapel mic. I can talk really loudly. I can project. But if you would like me to mic up, I will. No? Yes? Okay. Now, I know some of the guys that were in the cinema this morning had a few movies. So, for the ones that were in this room, I'm going to show you a movie. Just quickly, before I get started with the data strategy. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about data strategy, what that means, why it's important. But I thought I would just kind of get you in the mood. I'll show you a little snippet of a piece of a movie. Some of you have seen this clip because I use it quite a lot. From the movie Moneyball. Have you all seen a movie called Moneyball? Brad Pitt, it's quite old now. Yeah? It's about baseball. And basically it's just about 2 minutes, and they're just really talking about in the movie how they use analytics and understanding data to win baseball matches, and the way that they value, you know, in America, you know, buying and selling players is huge business, really big business. So it's really big money. So you've got to make sure you get your money's worth. So anyway, so I thought I would just show you this briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit about data strategy, which is a bit more maybe boring. Okay, see if it works and if the sound's all good and everything is fine. So let's get started. And there's a little bit of swearing in the video.
There are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us. We got to think differently.
In 1998, many American League teams' payrolls were soaring. As seen in Moneyball, new Oakland A's GM Billy Beane didn't have that luxury. He was forced to get creative.
It's better work. I'm just kidding.
You back him into a corner, he'll find a way out. And he was backed into a corner with his payroll, and he was just looking for a way to win.
How are these guys going to survive when they have X amount of money and their competitors have 10 times that amount of money? What these guys decided was, we got to look for new knowledge, we got to question everything. They found great inefficiencies in the way they were valuing players.
Beane had to find undervalued players. He looked beyond traditional metrics like batting average and RBIs, and instead relied on often overlooked statistics like on-base percentage and slugging percentage, numbers that were actually better indicators of a player's ability to create runs.
We were really trying to rob some of the things that were going on Wall Street and trying to apply them, because finding value is ultimately what they were trying to do on Wall Street and we were trying to do in baseball.
They found that defense was overvalued and offense was undervalued, and guys that got on base in unspectacular ways, they could buy for a fraction of the cost.
He drafted different than everybody else, got rid of good guys before they made big paydays. He was kind of that pioneer.
And if someone was coming along and trying to, out of necessity, innovate in this place, I thought, well, that's a great story. Because if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere.
Despite consistently having one of the lower payrolls in the league, the A's would go on to win 4 division titles, and the Moneyball phenomenon was on its way to transforming not only baseball, but the world beyond.
Okay, here's your little movie for the day. So if anybody thinks that you work in a really boring industry in data analysis and you're embarrassed to actually admit that you're in IT, then, you can actually be pretty cool while you're working for the series. But and I think some of the guys that were in Nabil's session earlier today, and also looking at the TM1 and what we can do with all those numbers, it's all great and fantastic, and the ideas of what we can do with data is really awesome. But we still need that raw material, because you can slap a tool on top of all sorts of things, but if you don't have good quality raw material, that is your data, you basically have nothing. Okay, so the tool's not going to really create amazing quality data for you. So what are we talking about? So basically, what I'd like to explain to you, my title at the moment is, my job title is, I'm a data strategist. I don't know what I just came up with that. I couldn't call myself a data scientist because I don't have a stats background, so that would be sort of false advertising. But I'm really passionate about making sure that what we build in BI, in FPM, in our whole sort of analytics world is of business value. So bridging that understanding of what data we've got down in tables and deep down in some database somewhere, and what those guys are asking questions in the boardroom and producing board packs, that there is some kind of relationship. Okay, so that's why I talk about data strategy. It's basically data, stuff we know, and the business, really, the strategy of business. Okay, and often when I talk about strategy, it sounds really dry and boring and old-fashioned, and you sort of think of those Bosparada that people used to go on. I don't think people still do that. And then they would spend like 3 days coming up with some miracle 5-year plan or something, and then nobody ever reads it after that. Pay a lot of money for that. But actually, strategy is really important. And this quote I really like from a guy called Michael Porter, who's quite sort of well known in the strategy world, the business, not data. And I just like this very quick little simple summary, and it makes so much sense, that strategy is deliberately choosing a different set of activities to deliver a unique mix of value. Surely that's what we all want to do. And I sort of highlighted the word deliberately, because to me that's one of the main things about a strategy. It's not to say, well, it would be nice if we did this, it would be cool if it just sort of magically happened overnight. No, strategy is saying we really, really need things to change around here. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Okay. And it is about change. So it's a little bit less, hopefully less dry, a bit more meaningful. So if we look at sort of some of our world, and I know we've got a mixture of business and traditional business and IT, that dreadful split that they always make us say, are you in business or IT? We're in BI, we're in everything. And I just sort of put a whole lot of words up here and thinking that, these worlds of data, of IT, separate from business, is not so much a problem anymore. It's actually more merging, and business people are getting involved a lot more in understanding what it is that they need to make business decisions. And so a lot of the words on here are seemingly IT or software related, but actually they're business related. So things like governance, POPI, metadata, very business actually, definitions and glossary, whether you want things out in the cloud or not. So there's basically a mixture of things that we've got to try and deal with all the time. Okay. And so being able to kind of split it out into, oh, that's not my problem because I'm in IT, that's the other guy's problem. It's not really the case anymore. And you have to understand that we're all in this together. But if we do just look at business people on their own and thinking about what are they actually wanting, and I'm sure we have people in the audience that are business, they would use that as their sort of hat, not IT. Really what business are trying to do, and I'm pretty sure, is that you've got unpredictable questions. You don't know what people are going to need to know today or tomorrow. Some guy's going to ask some random question and they're going to go, oh my word, never thought of that, or we don't have that stuff ready. So it's unpredictable, but yet when you do provide the answers, you need to have the surety that it's actually correct. So although it's ad hoc in nature, it still has to be valid. So that balance between quick and ad hoc and I don't know what you're going to ask next, balanced with it's got to be governed because people are actually using this data to make a decision of. It's not just for interest. So that's quite a tricky thing to do. And also the kinds of questions that they ask. They could be asking huge, big, strategic, objectively type questions. Lots of years, 5 years of data. What if we moved into some other new area of the business? What if we made an acquisition? I don't know, just big things. Could be quick tactical maneuvers. We really need to reorganize our department or our product sort of channel offering. What do we need to do to set ourselves up? Could be real-time operational actions. Right now, somebody's on the phone and called the call center, and we need to make a decision while the person is still on the phone before we lose them. So it's really real-time. And then, and of course, you saw some of the guys saw the sort of CDM type reporting, the compliance reporting every month, every quarter. You've got the board packs and all these things that need to be produced in exactly the right format every time, perfect, quickly. So it's a whole range of styles of using the data. And so with all of this in mind, we thought, well, we have to try and kind of make some structure out of this, otherwise it's just a whole lot of confusion. And so that's really why we've coined this term data strategy. It's really putting together, it's kind of like a bridge of saying, okay, we need to really understand what's going on in the business, what are the priorities, who are the users, what are their styles of interacting with numbers, and what data do we have? And is it quality? How do we govern it? How do we secure it? How do we make sure that it's coming in at the right pace? So we put together kind of a framework, and I mean, I know a lot of people would have heard of people process technology. That's pretty normal in the kind of strategy world. But in our world, what we've decided to is break it up a little bit further and make a specific focusing around business alignment to understand that what we're building, that we can actually verb it, we can actually write down exactly how this particular project, data, effort links to a business objective. Okay, so it's not just because we think it's a good idea. People process, I'm sure you all understand what that's about. And then taking technology and actually splitting it between data and technology. So in the technology world, looking at kind of things like hardware, software, and that sort of thing. And in the data specifically talking about how do you get data, where's the master source for a piece of data, how is it secured, do you want to have real-time flows, or is it sort of more historical data, etc. And then very importantly, focusing on transition. So that means transitioning people mostly. And most of us work in the sort of world of IT. IT is great, because if it doesn't work, you just break it and buy another one and you reboot the thing, or I don't know. People are slightly more tricky. Can't really just, reboot them. You just give them a boot, I don't know. But if you think of BI, I mean, the purpose of BI really, or analytics, is to encourage change. If you're just reporting on stuff you already know, and you're telling stuff people that they already know it, well, they're not going to do anything with it anyway. It's just, oh, well, that's interesting. Graphs going down. Yeah. That's not really BI. BI is there to promote and almost instigate change. You want the numbers to say, this thing's not doing so well. Maybe we should price it differently. Maybe we must just can it. Maybe we need to focus on it, give it more attention, or something. And so that involves people. It involves the way that people are working, the tools they're using, the processes they're following, all sorts of things. And without a focused attention on that, you're not really going to get very far with your BI, because it's just you're going to build stuff, you're going to kind of chuck it over the partition and hope somebody's going to catch it and run with it, and yet they don't. Why not? Because they don't really know how, or how's this going to affect me and my team and all that sort of thing. Okay, so in the BI strategy, we really do focus on a lot of those areas and try and understand what we're going to do. And also what we do in the strategy is not necessarily, it's not a plan as such as putting guidelines and principles together, because we can't predict everything that's going to happen. Okay? And if you think that you can write a strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, I'm afraid in this day and age, it's not possible, because you don't know who's going to invent some crazy thing tomorrow and it's going to upset that completely. So really what the strategy is about is putting together principles, guidelines, recommendations of, if this situation occurs, these are the things you need to consider, and then you choose the best path for your environment and go on. So it's not a case of like building some blueprint and then you sit back and you just implement the blueprint. Unfortunately, if only, it would be nice, but it doesn't work like that. So thinking about that, I put this little thing here. The strategic plan is dead. Long live strategy. I don't know if it's kind of a bit controversial, but whatever. Because it really is. I mean, we know that these days you can't really plan that far ahead. But it doesn't mean to say you have to give up and not plan. You can't just work every day as if every day is a new day. You actually still do need to have some kind of goal, some kind of objective as to where you're going to get there, and the basic guidelines or principles of how you're going to get there. Okay, does that make sense? I saw this quote the other day and I just thought it was so great. This is old Eisenhower from way back, long time. Many us old people can do read history of other history. It's good. So he said, he went into battle, was planning battles or things every day during the Second World War, and he made this statement: plans are nothing, planning is everything. So again, he was saying, you sit together in the morning and you kind of make a plan, but things happen and then you kind of never really, it doesn't come to pass the way you imagined it. But again, not to say that don't plan. It's the process of planning that's really important. It's the process of thinking about all the different things that can affect your delivery, and bringing the people together and having that discussion, and then kind of going, okay, now this is a priority, that we can leave, this we must consider, and on we go. Okay, does that also make sense? So planning is really important, but don't worship the plan. Okay. Because this is really the new normal. If you think, I know we've seen, you've seen examples of companies that are just doing strange things that we would never have been able to predict a few years ago. People like Uber. I'm sure we've all done an Uber. I did my first one a couple of weeks ago. It's so exciting. Alibaba, the biggest retailer in the world. You thought it was Walmart? It's not Walmart. They don't own any stock, but yet they're the biggest retailer in the world. WhatsApp, we know what's going on with Vodacom and MTN at the moment. We've got some Vodacom people here, so I can't make any remarks. But hey, it's innovation, technology innovation. That's how that's how the world works. 3D printing. I was at a conference recently and there was a car that was like an actual drivable car. You could get in and drive and it was licensed to go on the road, and it was printed in a 3D printer. That was just ridiculous. So whatever we think we know and understand today, it's not necessarily like that. So how do we cope? Well, we've got to think about other kinds of things, other kinds of skills and capabilities that we have to try and engender. Things like being agile. And I don't mean the agile project management thingy, I mean actually being agile, which goes with adaptability. So the ability to change, the ability to think, well, I know I did it like this yesterday or the last 3 years, but it's not necessarily going to be like that forever. So having that feeling of I can change. Experimentation is a scary thought for a lot of people, because that probably means risk and money, because you need to be able to put some money up to try something out, and if it fails, well, it failed, but we're going to keep trying. But if you think of these kinds of companies, that's the only way that they get ahead, because they are willing to try something and fail and then try again. Because if you get it right first time, then actually you probably haven't really given yourself a big enough stretch target challenge. And disruption. All of this stuff is about disruption. So understanding that disruption is normal. It's part of the world we live in, and it's the people that will be able to grab onto that and use it to their advantage that will win. Okay. So these are the kinds of things that your business people are sort of grappling with. And that's why those questions that they ask you seem so unpredictable and out of the blue. Because they, every day, are getting hit with some new competition, some new thought. And so we've got to be ready for that. I won't go into too much detail, and this is actually a graphic that I found on a website that they actually do like sort of social change and stuff that's really in our world. But I quite like this little waterfall to say, okay, well, I need some structure. I need to have some idea of where to start, what do we need, what are the questions we need to ask ourselves. So things like starting at the beginning, saying what is our vision and theory, not of change necessarily, but just generally, which we've all done for many years, is just what do we want to achieve, okay? Where will we play? So that's really, for me, that says something like in the BI department, what are our responsibilities? How do we connect with maybe our IT colleagues? How do we, and then what is the responsibility of business? So which piece of the pie do we have to work with? How will we succeed? This, to me, is probably one of the most important and one of the most difficult and also one of the most left out things. Is that right at the beginning, when we're planning to do something, we often don't at that moment think, how will I know I've achieved this when hopefully I do achieve it? We think at the end of the thing, somebody says, oh, we spent all this money on this project, it's taken up 3 years, and we have to report back to the board around, our ROI, or, how did it go? And then we start thinking to ourselves, how can we articulate what it is that we've achieved? And we think of some sort of little stories and try and cost some things. And it's hard. It's very hard to almost articulate BI or ROI. It's very difficult. But it is something that when you're in the kind of mode of thinking strategically and you're trying to think where should we go and how are we going to get there, at that moment you think, how will we be able to, how will we know we've got there? Or how will we know we've actually gone forward? Okay, so something to think about. And then obviously what capabilities do we need? Skills, software, hardware, whatever. Okay, partnerships, etc. I'm just going to quickly talk through this, and it basically, I'm sort of repeating myself a little bit, but again, from a business point of view, they've got these various questions, those big strategic questions, the tactical kind of questions, and that mirrors very much what kind of data we need to have on hand to supply them. So what I've done is I've just kind of put a few very high-level characteristics around different kinds of data and what they're for. So strategic BI, obviously that's when you have that big dashboard with the big KPIs at the top and the thing that everybody sort of wants. Long trends, and they're measuring how well, what was the impact of some new big strategy. So it's very high level, but quite broad. So it's covering maybe multiple parts of your business and lots of years of history. But it's not really very detailed. You're not going to go down to it like a customer name or something. Okay. Tactical BI, a little bit more detailed, because now we're looking at maybe an operational type team who's dealing with claims or something. So you need to have a bit more focused data, medium term, and a little bit more detail. So now you may be going down into a little bit more detail. And then operational BI, as it says there, immediate impact of actions. It's almost moving towards that kind of real time. We need to know exactly when something's happened and steer them. I know at some telco that I know quite well, when you phone a call center, they immediately track, or they know your kind of overall customer value. So they know how valuable you are as a customer. And you will get routed to a call center queue that will match how important you are. So if you're sitting on the phone for many hours, then you need to spend a bit more on your data. But that's immediate. That's like very sort of immediate BI. And then there's always this debate around operational reporting. So operational reporting traditionally is the reports that come straight out of your operational system. So straight out of your ERP or your invoicing system or your HR system. And it's kind of outside of the BI world. It's becoming more and more blurry as we have better sort of processes and hardware where we can stream data, and it's not such a thing of moving data around. But still, if there's something that you really do need real time, and it's coming from one single source, and it really doesn't need any enriching from somewhere else. It's just the numbers come straight out of that system, don't need to do anything fancy with it, and you want it now. Then stick with your reports that come straight out of your operational system. But as soon as you're starting to think, oh, I need to merge this number and then compare it to something else, but it's still real time, think operational BI. Okay. So real time isn't the only factor that you have to think about. Is it something that BI must look after or not? But one of the most important things across this whole thing is having some kind of consistent language or rules. So you've got these different flavors of reporting. And maybe they come from the same source, but maybe they don't. But somehow, you need to make sure that when the executive sees that big number on his dashboard, and it sort of equals 1.322 million or something, as you drill down and go deeper and deeper into the detail through all of these levels, that number still adds up. And really the main way, the only way you can really do that is understanding underneath what are the calculations, what are the rules, what is the metadata, what are the names, all that kind of pretty boring but really important stuff. Okay, so that's your data definitions and your glossary and your business terms and your metadata and all that stuff. Okay, very important. Otherwise you're just going to end up again with this whole argument around my number is right and your number is wrong. But maybe that doesn't happen in your organization. Maybe it's just mine, I don't know. The thing with those is that normally what it is that the numbers are all actually correct in their own right. They're just different. They're different. But you're giving them the same name. And then you're saying, this is how many customers we've got. But then it's like, yeah, but is this a customer? What if they've left halfway through the month? Do we still pump them in? And a lot of stuff. So terminology and understanding is really important. So people often say, well, where do we begin? Maybe you've already far down the path, but you feel as if it's not really doing what you expected, and so you want to kind of take a bit of a standstill and not start again, but just start with a new approach. It looks very simple. We know it's not simple, but almost everybody is kind of here. They're in the integration and automation mode. They're still trying to kind of get data from various sources, glue it together, automate it so that it happens in the middle of the night, and then the next morning it's like magically there. And it's hard work. It's really hard work, because usually what's happened over many years is that all those source systems have done their own thing. And it's only when we try and bring them together and bring it and make it visible that we see all of the stuff. And then BI gets it in the neck. But actually it's not our fault, it's the stuff. But once we've, hopefully one day, when we've not finished this, but we've kind of finished portions of it, we can move on to the next level. And that sort of takes us into the world of understanding why. So this is what happened, when it happened, stuff. But really what we're wanting to understand is, why did it happen? Why did this customer, why did our churn suddenly get better? Or whatever. And so we're starting to really use our predictive and our deeper analytics tools. And then hopefully after that we can use our data to be that much more competitive and innovate. So we can say not just why we understand what happened, we even understand a little bit of why it happened, but now we can start thinking, okay, well, what must we do next? How can we stay ahead of that curve? How can we be disruptive instead of everybody else disrupting our lives? And really what's happening actually as we go up this stream is we are adding more and more connections. So in here, what we were doing is we were adding connections between data. We were sticking data together. But as we're moving up this thing, what we're doing now is we're connecting with people, business acumen, knowledge, past experience, all those things. And then we're going into what's happening outside our organization and we're connecting with what's going on in the world. So we're kind of creating more and more of a context of just not looking at one table and one column and one little report. And hopefully by doing all of that, we create more and more business value. Okay, but it's hard, it's not easy. So yeah. Actually, Alan was, I don't know if, some of you guys weren't in the session earlier, but he was showing us a really nice that kind of balanced scorecard cause and effect diagram. So you can look at those individual KPIs on their own, and you can see, revenues this, sales is that, profits this, I don't know, churn that, whatever. And individually those numbers all sort of make sense, but to actually draw those lines between when this moves or I increase this, I increase my sales, what other KPIs is it going to affect? Is it going to make them go up or down, or what's it going to do? And really those are those connections that we're trying to find. So I'm just going to quickly dig into, I don't know, I'm running out of, no, I'm okay. Into the first block, because it's even then at that first, sort of at the starting block that we get tripped up. And we're going to go, okay, I know I need to do something, but you know what? So I'm just going to dig into a little bit. So one of the things is often we do is we start by saying, okay, we've got a whole lot of reports people are doing in spreadsheets and cutting and pasting and manual scripts that they're running and I don't know, all sorts of things. So we need to just try and automate that. That's like the first thing. So let's have a look at our existing reports because that'll give us an idea of our KPIs and how we're going to design going forward. And that's all very well and good, and it's a nice, sort of almost an easy place to start. But be careful because that's going to kind of lead you down a path of being stuck in a box because you're going to design your data sources and your data structures precisely around what you know today and what you're reporting on today. Okay, and then somebody says, oh, but now we want to actually see by, I don't know, by region or something. You go, oh, you didn't have region because you didn't have region in your report that you gave me as my spec. So you never really thought of that. So be careful to just use those. It's a good start, but it's not the only start. The other option is we can have a look at data sources to say, okay, well, these are our data sources that we've got available. Obviously, we can't build something from the data that we just don't have. So we'll start with that. But again, that will maybe give you an idea of what you've got. How many of you are analyzing numbers by a dimension or some sort of thing that actually doesn't live in a source anyway? You know, some kind of a hierarchical grouping or something that the business just knows when I talk about this, it's this and this, but not that. And, you know, these ones we add together, but those ones we keep separate. Fine, but how do you know that? Okay. So a lot of the stuff we actually analyze and need, the business needs, is not in a column or a table anywhere in the data source. It's in somebody's spreadsheet, VLOOKUP, something. So again, if you just look at what's available, you're going to have a smaller view of what you need to build. Another option is looking at your business processes and trying to understand, well, what is it that the business does? What do we do? How does things move? You know, if we take on a new customer, what happens? And along the way, they're leaving kind of little breadcrumb trails of data. And you really want to understand, is this business process, the way that we're managing, I don't know, collections, something, is it efficient? How do we know we're doing really well, etc. So you try to measure the efficiency of that business process. Okay. So really what we're actually wanting to do, and this is where the hard graft happens, is that we're actually wanting to put all those three angles together to come up with some kind of a detailed data strategy. So we do need to know what are people reporting on today. We also need to know, well, what's available, because I can't really make plans to build something if the data's just not there. So that'll help prioritize where do I start. But also I need to make sure I'm collecting and I'm going to be able to monitor some new question that they're going to come up with. So if I understand the business process, it's more likely I'll be able to predict that. Okay. Okay, I am going to talk a little bit about big data. So either you're going to, in the audience, you're going to groan, and go, oh, that was just so last week. Or you're going to go, yeah, we on that road, but what do we do? So, yeah, I don't know which camp I'm in. I haven't decided yet. But just quickly, just for those people maybe who don't really know, I mean, really what big data is, and that's why I put it in brackets all, because I don't like the word big, because it gives us a feeling that big data is just about volume. It's not only about volume. In fact, it might not even be about volume. But it's about kind of similar theme to what I'm saying, is that it's a whole mixture of things. Volume, possibly. Velocity, so that whole real-time streaming of things and being able to grab data as it's coming in. Variety, that's one of the biggest problems that we have. So it's all over the place and it's not necessarily out of a nice structured ERP database, the normal form something. It could be, you know, some unstructured stuff. And then this fancy word veracity, which really just talks about the accuracy and the credibility of the data. So it goes again to that kind of concept of metadata and rules and understanding. And then some people even add a fifth V, and that's value add, or value. So we're in the V's. So that was just a little bit of background. And this, I stole this from Google Images. It's amazing what you can find on Google Images. And it's not necessarily, I don't want to go through it, but it was just a kind of nice picture which I like because it shows different kinds of data coming in And it shows that if you do go big data or have some kind of a Hadoop type MPP, whatever, it sits in parallel to your data warehouse. It's not necessarily to say, okay, well, now we're going to go big data, don't need data warehouse anymore because now we've got to do. That's not the case. Okay. Or, you know, they basically work in tandem. I don't want to go into too much detail there, but it was really just to say it's complementary, not at all. Okay. So what do we have to deal with in a data strategy? Well, there's all that business stuff, and then I just put a whole lot of words on the slide, and I'll try to make it a bit more readable, but still it's a lot. So even if we're looking at business and business process and value, there are some really technical and important things that we also need to address. So just things about the architecture. So are you going to build a warehouse? If you've got one, is it working? Do you have operational data stores for like real-time streaming? I don't know. Do you have data labs or sandboxes? And how do you manage those? How do you make sure that whatever was that temporary solution in the data lab doesn't stay temporary for 10 years? And the data labs end up taking up more disk space in the warehouse. So, not to say you shouldn't have them, but it's all around how do we actually work with them and manage them. Do we want to look at data virtualization or federation? Do we actually physically have to move the data from A to B, or can stuff happen sort of on the fly virtually? Is it a possibility? Real-time streaming, is this something that we need to think about? And that goes with data at rest, data in motion. So typically what we do now is we will load data, put it somewhere, and then after the fact we'll go and query that data and we'll look for stuff in that data. Okay, so that's data at rest. The data's come in, it's sitting, it's at rest, and then we go and query it. Data in motion means it's a bit that call center kind of example. It's as the data's moving, you intercept it, you apply some algorithm, you do something, and you let it go. And you may not even save it afterwards, because you've already dealt with it. Or you may save it. I don't know. But that's what data in motion means. Okay. So those are kind of architectural type things you have to think about. Data modeling, are you going to do the Ralph Kimball approach or the Inman approach or the combination of the two or neither? You know, you're going to keep everything in third order form. Do you need to have big flat cohort studies for statistical analysis? How are you going to exploit this data? So you've got to think about how do we want to report? Are there advanced analytics? Self-help, how are we going to empower the user but still govern what they're doing? It's not like a free-for-all. Do we want to have data discovery tools? What about information architecture? How do people categorize and group their data together and make it easily available on their portals and things? And then, of course, there's all the security concerns, POPI, governance, and then touching on things like if you're wanting to go into the big data world, maybe looking at cloud and going further into predictive. So these are things that you think, it's data strategy, it's just build a data warehouse. I know. It's not just that. There's a lot to consider. Yeah. I know I'm just like screaming through these slides, so if you're with me yet, or still, I don't know. So, what do we do? Okay, so one of the things we start doing is actually just exploring and trying to get a sense of what people are understanding and how they work. And so this looks like a complete dog's breakfast, which it sort of is. But I like to use this example because this was just notes that I took from a conversation with a person who had a data warehouse and they had an operational data store and they had BI software. And so when you draw the sort of typical architecture, it looks beautiful. They've got the nice block and sources and out to the users. So it all, in theory, looks organized. And then you talk to them and you say, okay, well, how do you work? I well, I run this query, then I pass it on to so-and-so, and I have to export it to Excel, and then they take it and they put it in a PowerPoint, and then they send it to so-and-so, and then they stick it together. And then you start getting the real truth around what's going on. And it's not necessarily all technology. It could be, well, I get this, I always have to wait for Fred to give me the numbers because he's always late, and then when I get them, they're usually wrong, and then I have to deal with it. So those are things that you need to hear so that you can figure out a way of resolving that. Okay. So it all looks very messy, and typically that is the world we're in. So when we are doing kind of research, and I like this picture. It's just a big squiggle. like this picture, it's just a squiggle. But think about it, when you're kind of in the middle of things and you've had a meeting here and then you've gone and you've run a query and then you've got an email and spreadsheet, and it's just like here. It's just a big muddle. So we've got to figure out a way of taking this big muddle and kind of finding the key things out of that to make a plan, to make some simplicity and some goal out of all of that. Okay. So one of the ways that I start is I use this, and it's from a book that is called Business Model Generation. And it looks very simple, but it actually just helps to kind of just take out the noise and just get back to what it is that the business is trying to understand and measure and do. Okay, and it could be a whole business, it could be a piece, it could be a division, it could be a department, whatever your focus is. And really, I'll just quickly walk you through it. Basically, it starts in the middle, it says value proposition. So you basically just write in there, what is it that this company does? Why do customers come to us and nobody else? And how do we know if we're doing the right thing? And then in order to deliver that product or service, you need to have certain key activities. So these are your processes. You need to, have a printing machine that goes and prints things. And you have resources, so you have materials or people or buildings or whatever it is. And maybe you need key partners. So those are kind of your inputs to your business or your team. And then you've got your outputs. So once we built this thing, how do we get it out there to the market? Do we have certain customer relationships? Do we go by different channels differently? Maybe we deal with them differently. And maybe customer segments. We actually have different product sets for different customer segments. So just high level. And then of course there's always cost. How do we measure our costs and how do we measure our revenue? Very simple, but quite a nice way of just sort of structuring a conversation into some blocks. We all like to put things in blocks. Because out of the box thing, we don't like it in the box. And then what we can do is we can take that design and we can almost flip it on its head and say, okay, well now if we've understood the individual little elements of what's going on in the business or what makes up the business, we can try and start putting it together in a slightly different way to say, okay, well what are the things that we measure? And then when did this thing happen? How did it happen? Who had it happen to? What? And you can start seeing that this is starting to look very kind of star schema-y. Because it's a nice, gentle way of moving from a business process thinking into a data modeling world. Okay. Anyway, that's just one of the processes. This is just an example of something that we did at another customer. Basically taking this sort of picture. Now imagine you've interviewed, maybe 10 people and they've all got a drawing like this, and now we've got to try and merge it all together. So the output is really something that looks a bit like this. And then eventually even putting together almost a heat map to say, where do we start? The darker the orange, the more important the thing, or the urgency. And then instead of having these reams of strategy documentation that you can have as support, but just one page is often quite a nice thing. Just put it on the wall and then make sure that we're still focusing on that one thing. This is also another style that I'm busy working on to see if this will also work quite nicely. So basically to say that overall this is really the main purpose of this exercise is to help business make decisions. That old phrase that we used to call ourselves decision support. Remember that? Maybe you guys are too young. It's a long time ago. But that is actually still really what we do. We are supporting the decision makers to make those decisions. Either, we're guiding them to say, hey, you haven't looked at this, go look at it. Or they're asking the question and we're helping them answer the question. Okay, so decisions in the middle, and then the things that really we need to consider in our building of our data environment and our BI environment. Strategic alignment, very important, as you said. Who's the audience? Risk and governance, process, innovation. So trying to get us to that top line of saying, okay, well, why? What must we do next? Data, technology, and then also feedback and change. How do we learn from our mistakes? How do we go forward from here, not just do the same old thing? You know what Einstein said. I don't know if you really said it, but anyway. If on Facebook Einstein said it, then it must be. So what do? Well, our approach is really to have a time-boxed advisory service. So it's not a never-ending thing, because this could be a never-ending exercise, never-ending story. So depending on the scope or the size of your organization or the complexity, we could either, do a kind of a 2-week engagement or probably a maximum of 2 months. I wouldn't want to go longer than that because then it's too much and it would just be too complex. And really what it is it's completely software, industry, function, whatever, agnostic. It's basically understanding what it is that the business does, needs, and where's the data coming from, where are the issues, and trying to map it out. Yeah. No technology other than, PowerPoint, no, paper and pencil. And really following very simple, discovery phase of just interviewing people, looking, digging, talking to people from the CFO to the DBA, anybody that I can pin down for half an hour. And then synthesizing all of that, bringing all of this input together and trying to make sense of it all. And then doing a kind of a collaborative review of saying, this is what I've figured out. These seem to be common themes. Have I missed it entirely? Is this right? Some kind of review. And then prioritizing jointly with people in the business. Because for me to come in and say, you need to focus on this and this and this, when you kind of go, yeah, we tried that 3 years ago and it just failed because of X, Y, Z, which I might have missed. You know your environment far better than I do, so it would be, so trying to sort of prioritize jointly, and then, hopefully out of that comes an agreed roadmap. So there's big chunky blocks of things that we need to address in a reasonably logical order. Because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to take all of this information, be it data, people, what's in their heads, we're trying to make those connections, we're trying to join the dots. Okay, and that's really where people always talk about data, information, knowledge, blah, blah, blah. So I like this picture. That's what's really happening. Because it's when you join things together, then you kind of have that moment of, oh, right, that's what it means. And then being able to pick out the stuff that's really important and knowing which ones. Okay. And that's all I have to say on data strategy. You got anything? So I hope that was sort of meaning, that it run true with you, or that it was useful. And yeah, I don't know if you've got any questions now, or if you want to have a little tea break and come chat to me individually, or something. I don't know. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. It's fine. So, I've managed to catch up a little bit of time, so that's good. So I can send you out, you're going to go eat some more. I can see that there's sugar back there. And tea. And then we'll, after tea, what we'll do is we'll come back. Actually, I'm glad we've saved a bit of time because I want to leave a bit more time afterwards for demo. Lots to show you. Hope you're all staying for the new Cognos Analytics demo because you're going to want to. Okay, we should do it. Okay, you're free.